And being an entrepreneur, we came to it later in life. I mean, I already had a corporate career and I was close to 40 when I started Mona. And I think that it needed to be, there was a really high bar for starting a company, right? It needed to be something we truly cared about.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. 20-Minute Leaders is a proud supporter of Make-A-Wish Israel and Tech to Peace, and is in proud collaboration with Secret Chord Ventures, J Ventures, Riverside FM, Fusion VC, Birthright Excel, J Impact, Leap, Google for Startups, and Hippo, and in media partnership with CTech. Hello and welcome to another episode of 20-Minute Leaders. Today I'm with Yotam Oren, the co-founder and CEO of Mona. Disclaimer, I'm an angel investor in this startup. And Mona is a startup developing an intelligent monitoring platform for AI and automations in a variety of industries. With over 15 years of experience as a technology executive, Yotam gained extensive experience bringing data-driven products into the enterprise software market. Prior to Mona, he was a growth and product executive at ADP and an associate partner at McKinsey, and Yotam holds a B.Sc in computer science from Ben Gurion University and an MBA from the University of Michigan. It's going to be a really great conversation. I'm excited to hear your story, the story of Mona, the story of what's happening with AI today, the different opportunities that are presented as the whole world is transitioning to leverage AI, what that means for organizations, what that means transitioning from research to product, and where you are in all of this and where Mona is situated across all of this. And so thank you again for being here, Yotam. You have a really interesting background leading up to your co-founding of Mona, including some basketball, some engineering, some consulting. Tell me a little bit about your journey connecting the dots for me backwards.
Some may say I've been all over the place, but I like to say that every step in the way led me to the next step and taught me something new. But I have in my professional career, post-military, post-university, I've been around data my entire career. I started as a big data engineer, working actually in the very early days of smartphones on bringing mapping and navigation into the handhelds. This was before Google Maps, was all over the place and free and kind of, made tools, navigation software less relevant maybe from paid providers. And so I was working for a startup that did that for a little bit. And working on actually big data problems, right? I mean, geolocation data was big data back then. We didn't call it that, but that's what it was. And I later, left engineering and became a management consultant in McKinsey. And, a lot of people look at that, funny a little bit, McKinsey consultants becoming entrepreneurs. But, it's what I love, and earnestly about the consulting experience that really set me up well to be an entrepreneur is that it's almost like a really fast track to see a ton of industries and how things work, and taking things that work well in one industry and transferring them to another or finding common themes is something I'm really passionate about and kind of love, which is why I'm, later down the line, years later, a decade later, I'm working on this horizontal platform, right, that serves multiple industries. But even at McKinsey, I was doing a lot of data work. Back then in the early 2010s, we used to call it big data officially. And a lot of the questions were around, we collect all this operational data or, a logistics company or a bank. How do we leverage this data to make better decisions? This was the early days of investing in machine learning. The infrastructure wasn't there. It was very expensive to produce models, develop them. Most companies did not have an army of PhD data scientists yet, but we were definitely there was a lot of talk about that, and it was definitely headed in that direction. And then I joined corporate America, and I worked in a Fortune 500 called ADP in the HR tech space. I actually led an analytics team that worked on a recommendation system of sorts, which again was in this early day. I'd say like less sophisticated or more traditional predictive capabilities, and not as advanced as they exist today. But firsthand experience with how challenging it is to drive adoption of machine learning in the enterprise. And then fast forward to today, in the last 4 years with Mona, with two brilliant friends and former Google engineers, and we're all passionate about helping organizations with this shift and of adopting an AI in a broader scale, which I know we'll talk about.
I love it. Okay, well let's dive in. Tell me about AI in 2022. What's happening?
Yeah. So so much money has already been poured in, right? The investment has been sky high, but most will agree that to a large extent the practice has remained largely a research-oriented practice. What I mean by this is that still, to a large extent, we build data science teams and we hire data scientists, and we tell them your job is focused on data, on understanding business problems, on collecting a lot of data, on modeling, right? On creating models, leveraging this data to solve those business questions. But the end product of your work is a model. And once you develop a model and you test it and you hand it over this virtual organizational fence, and it becomes someone else's problem. And, this is, I think that a lot of the money that's been poured into AI programs across industries to date has been working this way, where the data scientists sit in the lab and they're building those amazing models, but the level of adoption in the organization is still not as high as it should be. And partially it is because there's great research, but there's no operational readiness. It's not yet a great product in a lot of cases. Now, of course, I'm generalizing, and there are cases where it succeeded. More and more organizations started realizing that this is not a way to run their multi-million-dollar AI programs, and they need to start shifting. They need to start thinking about product discipline, about how to adopt more product-oriented thinking into those AI programs. And part of it is about changing the role of the data science teams, changing the role of the AI teams, making them more like product teams. The rise of machine learning engineering is a part of this shift and transition. The rise of this practice called ML Ops, machine learning operations, is part of this, which is about incorporating and introducing software engineering best practices and production best practices into AI. And of course, the area we're in, which is called, monitoring observability, is an element of this transformation and shift too. And
so if we're looking at monitoring observability, though I like how you call it an intelligent machine learning monitoring platform. Right. What does this actually mean? Why do AI teams need a monitoring and observability platform?
So let's start with with the fact that monitoring is a foundational need because it's part of product discipline, right? You don't want your customers being the first ones to find out that something is wrong, right? Now, predictive models are notoriously difficult to test in the lab. You do the best you can to validate. You put them in the business process in production, and now they serve their customers, and there's, the volumes go up, etc. And but you want to know if it's working as intended. You want to know if it's working as well as it should. Now, why do you need intelligent monitoring? So, like, the fact that you need monitoring is kind of a given in that sense, right? That it serves the business is relying on it. Intelligence, a lot of it is because problems to a large degree in AI start really small and are hidden in plain sight before they burst into the surface. And when they burst into the surface, a lot could be at risk, not just revenue left on the table or, a chatbot going rogue. There's reputational risk. There might be significant money risk. For example, in a credit card, fraud detection system that processes billions of dollars, right? Every prediction that goes wrong could be, meaningful losses to a credit card processor or a bank. And these things are impacting real people. AI is used for performance management, talent, it's for recruiting, right? To approve and reject, credit, loans. So there's real implications for real people, and you want to know when something is going wrong. The key with intelligence is that problems start really small. So you want to catch them when they're still small, when the impact is not as big, when maybe your business KPIs haven't even suffered yet, and you can be proactive in addressing them before you go through. And you really need to be intelligent, because how do you go small? How do you go grand, right? There's so many ways to slice and dice, credit card transactions, right? For example, you might run 1 billion a day, right? How do you slice and dice? How do you find the pockets where there might be issues? So it definitely is not an easy, it's a big undertaking.
Okay, so if we're looking at it from a product perspective, what have you realized about the different ways that these AI teams are working, and that you've then tailored your own solutions to them? Sort of what is the consumer behavior of these data science teams or these research teams that you said, okay, this is sort of the pattern that we're seeing, and this is how we're going to be shaping our product to fit their needs?
Yeah, so number one, they want to be independent. They want to be able to iterate independently and be less dependent on other subgroups or teams within their organization, such as DevOps or other engineering teams. And so it needs to be a tool that they can use. It needs to be accessible to them. They need to be able to tailor it to their problem, because every AI use case is a snowflake and has its own unique characteristics and unique situations, circumstances. And so it needs to be highly flexible and configurable. And if you come in from the outside, as a monitoring solution provider and tell the data scientist, I can tell you if your algorithms are working or not, they wouldn't believe you, right? So it needs to be the tools, process, the platform, but it needs to be moldable into working for them and for what they need to get out of it. And finally, it needs to not dominate their time, right? At the end of the day, it needs to benefit the research. It needs to provide them new information, like new insights, things they don't already know or can't know themselves. But this doesn't need to be something that they spend their entire day in. You need to make them more efficient. One anecdote is that the average data science team will spend a third of their time on production break fix and like investigations and trouble. And this needs to reduce that time to a minimum, right? To make it so that they still need to be accountable, and they want to be accountable for the full life cycle. They want to be accountable for how their models and research perform in the business. They don't want to spend their days in production troubleshooting. So it needs to make them more efficient and not dominate their time.
So if we're looking a little bit higher level at the space that we're in, and one of the things that we very briefly mentioned before we started the interview was you mentioned this idea of product-oriented AI, which is sort of in a relatively new thinking or an evolutionary thinking of within the AI domain. Tell me a little bit about what you meant by that.
Yeah, in a way, it's a set of best practices that organizations are starting to adopt in order to scale their AI programs the right way, take them out of the lab and put them into business, and make sure that the business can truly rely on those AI-driven applications. Now, within product-oriented AI, what do we actually mean, right? It means that there is more end-to-end accountability for outcomes, and that the AI team is the one that takes that accountability. It also means the success measure, success criteria for AI is no longer just about lab telemetry and ML telemetry, things like precision of models and recall, etc., but also actually were the business outcomes achieved or not, right? That's what the product is all about, right? That's what it's there for. And overall, it's just a better way to run your AI program if you're a big organization. And it's a trend, product-oriented AI, right? It's not some sort of like IP, right? It's a trend that we see across industries, and we're trying to organize it and call it out. And it doesn't, by the way, it doesn't mean the end of research. It doesn't mean less research or less investment in research. In fact, teams that adopt product-oriented AI practices eventually benefit the research. They become more effective in their research because that complete life cycle, additional data that you can get from looking into your full life cycle and how your AI performs in business can actually teach new things to the research, right? Like add new value and add new insights into the research roadmap. So it's a complementary trend, and it's definitely one that is here to stay. I think that it's also something that executives and sponsors of AI programs relate to. MLOps, I think, is another term that's very important and relevant. But it is definitely more of an operational term and more associated with essentially adopting engineering and IT practices, where product-oriented AI wraps around this, right? And is the way also you bridge the gap between the AI team and the business.
Where did you develop your own passion and enthusiasm for this world? It's not a trivial company for an entrepreneur to go on a journey. I'm curious where your own passion came from in regards to this. How did this whole thing come about?
Yeah, I mean, it's a number of things, right? It's always difficult to pinpoint the exact driver behind that thing, but it combines a few things that I really enjoy. Number one, I've been around the data industry, so I know it, and I'm a true believer in the value that AI can bring to a variety of industries, and really change our lives in a lot of ways. And so I'm really excited about being part of enabling the growth in AI in general. The second thing is that it's a really difficult problem to solve, because it's a brand new category, because it requires deep technology, a big data system, etc. And so that's more intellectually challenging and exciting. And frankly, the team I work with, my co-founders, they wouldn't have been willing to tackle a smaller problem, right? It needed to be really big for them to go after. And I benefit from this because I get to work with, really smart folks on a really difficult problem. So that's another part of this. And I am personally a data nerd, right? I love to look at data. I also love the idea that it's horizontal. I mean, I know this is like, I can add more and more reasons here, right? But, I've been horizontal most of my career. In consulting, I've been horizontal. I like to work across industries. I think there's so much to learn, when you're not vertically focused, and there's so much to share across. And so that's beneficial too. And, and being an entrepreneur, we came to it later in life. I mean, I already had a corporate career, and I was close to 40 when I started Mona. And I think that there was a really high bar for starting a company, right? It needed to be something we truly cared about to go after.
And so the decision to go and become an entrepreneur at 40, that's not a trivial one.
It's not. And believe me, my wife and I had a lot of many conversations about, whether to do it or not, and whether it was the right time. I think that, at the end of the day, I realized when I came to this crossing that the fact that I was so excited about it when I was talking to her, and the fact that I had all these, every aspect of it sounded really exciting to me. Eventually made it a no-brainer. On paper, it might have been really difficult to decide to do that, especially where, as you know, as an entrepreneur, there's often a financial compromise, which, of course there was in my case. There's, you work longer hours, you definitely take, some things take a hit, some other priorities. But the level of excitement we had about this, the desire to work with these people who are also my friends outside of work, it really drove it home and made it a no-brainer.
Yotam, best of luck with Mona. Thank you so much for the time. I can't wait to share this with the world. We'll continue cheering. And thank you very much for being here with me. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Happy to have this conversation.